She was never meant to be seen. At least, that's what the world told her. Working the back rooms of a restaurant where people forgot your name was part of the job. Smile, serve, stay silent. Until one night, one sentence shattered the silence. And the obese woman everyone overlooked? She made the world stop and listen. But what happens when the spotlight finds someone who never asked for it? And what if her quiet defiance sets off something no one, not even she, can control? Stay with us. What happens next will break your heart and then rebuild it. Subscribe now for stories that stay with you. The dining room at the Ashford Room holds its breath every evening at 6. Crystal glasses catch the amber light from the chandeliers, casting tiny rainbows across pristine white tablecloths. But for Camila Bennett, this gilded paradise feels more like a beautiful prison where she's learned to move like a ghost. Her hands, weathered from years of washing dishes and scrubbing floors, adjust each fork and knife with the precision of a surgeon. Every placement matters here. Every detail is scrutinized by eyes that can afford to judge. She's 42 years old, her body soft and round in a world that worships sharp angles, but her movements carry a quiet dignity that speaks louder than any designer dress ever could. The weight of her uniform presses against her shoulders as she smooths down her apron for the 100th time today. In 3 hours, she needs to catch the 11 o'clock bus. Luna has a math test tomorrow, and they haven't finished reviewing fractions. The thought of her daughter's concentrated frown over homework makes Camila's chest tighten with a familiar mixture of love and worry. Renee Palmer emerges from the kitchen corridor, her chef's coat pristine, despite the chaos that surely lives behind those swinging doors. She's one of the few people in this place who looks at Camila and sees a person, not just a pair of working hands. "You always seem so calm in the eye of the storm," Renee says, leaning against the service station. "How do you do it?" Camila offers a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. "Luna has that test tomorrow. If I miss the 11 bus, there's no time to help her study." She pauses, folding a napkin with methodical care. Some storms you weather, others you just endure. Renee's expression shifts, and Camila knows what's coming before the words leave her lips. Today might be one of those enduring days. Graham Ellison reserved the garden room. The name hits Camila's chest like a small stone thrown into still water. Ripples of recognition spread through her body. She's heard the stories, seen the articles. Graham Ellison, tech billionaire, Atlanta-born and raised, known as much for his cutting business insights as for his ability to reduce grown adults to tears with a single observation. Camila isn't scheduled for direct service tonight. She's the invisible backup, the one who appears when crises need fixing, messes need cleaning, and dignity needs preserving. It's a role she's perfected over 8 years at the Ashford Room, being essential while remaining unseen. Jade Moreno, barely 23, with nervous energy radiating from every pore, clutches the reservation list like it might fly away. Her hands tremble slightly as she reviews the evening's arrangements. Camila has watched dozens of young servers come and go, most leaving in tears after their first encounter with Savannah's elite dining scene. Moving between tables, Camila's presence fills the space in a way that has nothing to do with her size and everything to do with her certainty. She knows every creak in these floors, every shadow cast by these lights. This room may not be hers, but she's claimed it through sheer persistence and quiet competence. Graham arrives 15 minutes early because men like him don't wait for anything. His light gray suit costs more than Camila makes in 3 months, and his pale eyes sweep the room like a predator assessing territory. Nothing about him asks permission. Everything about him takes. "The lighting is too warm," he announces to no one in particular, settling into his chair with the casual authority of someone who's never doubted his right to demand changes. This is dinner, not experimental theater. Jade serves the first course with the careful concentration of someone walking a tightrope. But nerves have their own gravity, and when she adjusts the plate's position, a single drop of truffle oil catches the edge and slides onto the pristine tablecloth. The silence that follows is deafening. Graham raises one finger, Not dramatically, just enough to stop the world. Could someone bring me a server who understands basic physics, please? The words slice through the air with surgical precision. Jade's face crumbles, her carefully constructed professional mask dissolving into the raw vulnerability of someone who's just been reduced to their worst fears. Without hesitation, Camila appears beside the table. Her movements are fluid, practiced. She removes the stained cloth with one smooth motion, replaces it with fresh linen, and sets down a new plate as if the previous moment never existed. Her hands never shake. Her expression never wavers. As she arranges the silverware, Graham's gaze fixes on her with the intensity of someone suddenly seeing something unexpected. "Have you always wanted this?" he asks, his voice carrying a different quality now. Not cruel, but genuinely curious. "This work, I mean." The question hangs in the air like incense, heavy and demanding attention. Every eye in the dining room finds them, though the other diners pretend to study their wine glasses and appetizers. Camila straightens to her full height, her dark eyes meeting his pale ones without flinching. When she speaks, her voice carries the weight of every sleepless night, every sacrificed dream, every moment she's chosen her daughter's future over her own desires. "My dreams are on hold while I raise my daughter," she says, each word deliberate and clear. But they're still breathing. Every single night, they're still breathing. The room doesn't gasp or whisper. Instead, it holds its breath like a church during prayer. Something has shifted in the air, in the light, in the space between heartbeats. Camila turns and walks away, her footsteps steady on the polished floor. She doesn't look back, doesn't wait for a response, doesn't apologize for taking up space with her truth. But everyone knows, in that moment, in that room, in that perfectly orchestrated world of crystal and expectations, something has changed forever. And it started with a woman who refused to disappear, even when the world expected her to vanish. The morning sun filters through the thin curtains of Camila's kitchen, casting gentle shadows across the small table where she's making oatmeal pancakes for Luna. Steam rises from the griddle, carrying the scent of vanilla and cinnamon through their modest apartment. It's the same routine they've shared for 3 years, ever since they moved to this place with its creaky floors and neighbors who play music too loud on Friday nights. But this morning feels different. Luna sits at the table with her phone in her hand, her dark eyes wide with something between confusion and excitement. "Mom," she says, her voice carrying that particular teenage inflection that means she's discovered something important. "Why are you on social media?" Camila's hand stills on the spatula. "What do you mean, baby?" Luna turns the phone screen toward her mother, and there it is, a video from last night at the Ashford room. The image quality is surprisingly clear, capturing the moment when Camila spoke to Graham Ellison with a dignity that seems to fill the frame. Below the video, numbers tick upward relentlessly. Thousands of likes, hundreds of comments, shares multiplying like wildfire. Camila takes a deep breath, feeling the weight of her daughter's expectant gaze. "Sometimes," she says, flipping a pancake with practiced ease, "we have to speak up, even when we're trembling on the inside, even when we're scared of what happens next." The walk to work feels different today. The same cracked sidewalks, the same morning joggers, the same smell of magnolia blossoms heavy in the Savannah air. But something has shifted in the invisible space around her. People's eyes linger longer. A woman at the bus stop nods with what looks like recognition. At the Ashford room, the crystal still catches the light the same way, the tablecloths still demand perfection, but there's a new gravitational pull in the room. And Camila is at its center. Jade Moreno appears beside her with the nervous energy of someone carrying urgent news. Her hands flutter as she speaks, her voice barely above a whisper. "Someone recorded everything last night. Your whole conversation with him. It's everywhere, Camila. Everywhere." Camila's eyes widen, her mind racing through implications she hasn't had time to consider. Recorded. The word tastes strange in her mouth, heavy with possibilities she never imagined. Clean audio, perfect angle, Jade confirms, pulling out her phone to show the various platforms where the video has spread. A customer at table 6 filmed it. She posted it with the caption about dreams that keep breathing, and it just exploded. The hashtags make Camila's chest tighten with an emotion she can't quite name. Silent hero, the woman who stopped a millionaire, invisible no more. Each phrase feels like a spotlight she never asked for, illuminating corners of her life she's kept carefully shadowed. Throughout the morning, the atmosphere at the restaurant shifts like weather changing. A delivery driver who's never acknowledged her existence offers a respectful nod. A busboy she's worked alongside for 2 years asks to shake her hand. The hostess mentions hearing about her on the radio during her drive to work. Frank Holloway, the restaurant manager with his perpetually worried expression and clipboard permanently attached to his hand, appears at her elbow with unusual urgency. "Camila, there's someone here who needs to speak with you." Rachel Monroe. The name sounds formal, official, like paperwork that requires signatures and consequences that can't be undone. Camila swallows hard, her mind immediately jumping to termination, lawsuits, corporate damage control. Rachel Monroe turns out to be a woman in her 50s with silver hair and intelligent eyes that seem to take in everything at once. She's a communications consultant for the restaurant group, but instead of delivering the reprimand Camila expects, she offers something entirely different. "You did something last night that nobody saw coming," Rachel says, settling into a chair in the small office behind the kitchen. "You spoke truth to power without raising your voice, without being disrespectful, without creating a scene. You just existed in your own dignity." Camila shifts uncomfortably and used to being the focus of such intense positive attention. "I wasn't trying to make a statement. I was just tired of feeling erased every time I came to work." Rachel's smile reaches her eyes. That's exactly why it's resonating with people. Authenticity can't be manufactured, Camila. And right now, there are journalists wanting to talk to you, producers asking for interviews. Are you ready for what comes next? The question hangs in the air like a challenge and an invitation wrapped together. Camila thinks about Luna, about their small apartment, about dreams that have been breathing in the dark for so many years. "I didn't do this to become a headline," she finally says. "I just wanted to stop feeling invisible for one shift, in one moment, to one person." Rachel nods with the understanding of someone who's watched authentic moments become movements. That's how revolutions start, Camila. Not with grand gestures or calculated strategies. They start with truth. Later, cutting through the side garden to avoid the growing cluster of people near the restaurant's front entrance, Camila finds herself face to face with Graham Ellison. He's standing near the fountain, his expensive suit somehow less intimidating in the natural light filtering through the oak trees. For a moment, neither of them moves. The air between them carries the weight of their previous encounter, but also something new. Recognition. Not the kind that comes from fame, but the deeper acknowledgement that passes between two people who have seen each other clearly. Graham looks away first, adjusting his sleeve cuff in a gesture that seems almost nervous. But as he walks past her, there's something in his posture that wasn't there before. A subtle shift that speaks of respect earned rather than demanded. Back in the kitchen, Jade appears at her side, breathless with excitement and worry. "Camila, he came back. Graham Ellison. He's been waiting in the front lobby for 20 minutes. Camila's heart skips, though she's not sure if it's from anxiety or anticipation. She makes her way to her workstation, where between the reservation cards and order slips, a small piece of paper waits. The handwriting is precise, confident, written with the same authority that commands boardrooms and shapes industries. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Gee. The note trembles slightly in her hands, not from fear this time, but from the understanding that some conversations have the power to change everything that comes after. And this morning, surrounded by the growing echo of her own voice, Camila Bennett realizes she's ready to find out what happens when invisible people step into the light. The side garden of the Ashford room feels like a different world from the pristine dining room inside. Here, jasmine vines climb the wrought iron fence with wild abandon, their white flowers releasing a sweetness that mingles with the earthy scent of morning dew still clinging to the grass. Ancient oak trees filter the sunlight into gentle patterns that dance across the gravel path, and for the first time in years, Camila feels like she can breathe deeply without asking permission. Graham stands near the fountain, but something about him is different. The armor of arrogance that seems so permanently fused to his presence has cracked, revealing glimpses of something more human underneath. When he looks at her, his pale eyes don't carry that clinical assessment she's grown accustomed to from wealthy patrons. Instead, there's something that looks almost like vulnerability. "I was arrogant," he says, the words coming out with the careful precision of someone unaccustomed to apologies. "And worse than that, I was automatic, like a machine programmed to diminish people without even seeing them first." The admission hangs in the air between them, fragile as spun glass. Camila watches his face, searching for the performance she's learned to expect from people in his position. But there's something raw in his expression that defies her cynicism. "Since last night," he continues, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, "I can't stop thinking about what you said. About dreams that keep breathing. About holding space for hope even when the world tells you to let it die." Camila crosses her arms, a gesture that's part protection, part challenge. "I'm not here to absolve your conscience, Mr. Ellison. I'm not your redemption story." He nods, accepting the boundary she's drawn with the grace of someone who recognizes earned resistance. "I want to know you better," he says simply. "Not as a lesson in humility, not as a charity case to make myself feel better. Just as a person who said something that made me realize I've been sleepwalking through conversations with human beings for years." The honesty in his voice catches her off guard. She's prepared for manipulation, for the subtle condescension that wealthy people often mistake for kindness. But this feels different, dangerous in its simplicity. "Coffee," he suggests. "Somewhere neutral. Somewhere that isn't here, where neither of us has to perform our assigned roles. Just conversation." Camila doesn't answer immediately. The part of her that has survived 8 years in service industry knows that powerful men often collect interesting stories to tell at dinner parties. But there's another part, the part that spoke up in that dining room, that recognizes something genuine in his request. "I'll think about it," she says finally, already knowing that she will say yes, already feeling the pull of curiosity stronger than her protective instincts. 3 days later, they sit across from each other in a small cafe on Whitaker Street, surrounded by exposed brick walls and the comforting aroma of cornbread baking in the kitchen. The wooden tables bear the scars of countless conversations, ring stains from coffee cups, and scratches from keys and pens. It's the kind of place where pretense goes to die, where people speak in their real voices instead of their professional ones. Graham tells her stories that feel too intimate for a millionaire's carefully curated public image. About failing algebra in high school and hiding his report cards from a father who measured worth in achievements. About a business that collapsed when he was 25, leaving him sleeping on friends' couches and questioning everything he thought he knew about success. About gardens he tried to plant as a child that never bloomed because no one taught him that some things need more than good intentions to grow. "Tell me about your childhood," he says, stirring sugar into his coffee with the focused attention of someone trying to do something perfectly ordinary without overthinking it. Camila finds herself sharing memories she rarely speaks aloud. About summer evenings when her grandmother would braid her hair and tell stories about women who survived by being clever instead of loud. About learning to cook by standing on phone books to reach the stove, about the weight of becoming the adult in her household when she was barely 13. "You want to know what I really think?" she says, leaning back in her chair and studying his face. "I think you're asking the right questions, but I'm not sure you're ready for honest answers." Graham sets down his cup, meeting her gaze directly. "Try me." "Do you actually want to change?" she asks, "or do you just want to feel like you've changed?" The question cuts through the comfortable cafe atmosphere like a blade. For a moment, Graham looks like a man who's been asked to perform surgery on himself without anesthesia. But he doesn't look away, doesn't deflect with charm or humor. "I don't know yet," he says finally, "but I'm trying not to run from the question." Her phone buzzes against the table, a text from Jade that makes Camila's blood turn cold. She reads it twice before the words fully register, then closes her eyes and takes a breath that feels like drowning. "Everything okay?" Graham asks, and she realizes her face must be showing more than she intended. "Mateo Cordero showed up at the restaurant," she says, her voice carefully controlled. "He's Luna's father. He disappeared when she was still in diapers, and now he's asking questions about me." Graham's expression shifts, and she braces herself for the inevitable masculine response, the offer to fix, to protect, to solve. Instead, he simply nods. "I'm not here as an opportunist," he says quietly. "This isn't about rescuing you or being your hero. It's about listening to you, about learning how to see people instead of just processing them." Camila finishes her coffee in silence, processing the weight of unexpected complications piling onto her already transformed life. When she stands to leave, she does something that surprises them both. She reaches across the table and briefly touches his hand. "Thank you," she says, "for not trying to fix everything." That evening, Luna sits at their small kitchen table, homework spread around her like battle plans, but her attention focused entirely on her mother's face. "Mom," she says with the directness that only teenagers can manage, "Jade texted me. She said Mateo came to your work." Camila kneels beside her daughter's chair, bringing herself to Luna's eye level. At 13, Luna has her father's dark eyes, but her mother's determined chin, and right now, she looks like someone preparing for news that might change everything. "Yes, he did," Camila says simply. "But here's what I need you to understand, baby. Whether or not you want to see him, whether or not you want to know him, that's your choice. Only yours. No one else gets to decide what's best for your heart." Luna nods solemnly, the weight of adult decisions settling on her young shoulders. "What do you think I should do?" "I think," Camila says, smoothing her daughter's hair, "you should take all the time you need to figure out what you want. And I think you should trust that whatever you decide, I'll support you completely." Later that night, after Luna has gone to bed, Camila sits at her laptop and composes an email that feels like jumping off a cliff. She addresses it to an editor at Harper's Magazine who reached out earlier that day, wanting to write a feature about her viral moment. "I want to tell my story," she types, her fingers moving with more confidence than she feels. "But I want to tell it with my own words, not wrapped in whatever narrative makes for good copy. I'm not your inspiration porn, and I'm not your symbol of anything. I'm just a woman who spoke up once and discovered that her voice was stronger than she knew. Can we talk about what that actually means?" She hits send before she can second-guess herself, then sits in the quiet of her living room, listening to the sound of her own breathing and wondering what kind of person she's becoming. Outside, Savannah sleeps under its canopy of Spanish moss and secrets, but inside this small apartment, Camila Bennett is wide awake, writing the next chapter of a story she never planned to tell. The morning light filters through the restaurant's tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors where Camila has walked thousands of miles over the past 8 years. But today, the familiar space feels different, charged with possibilities that didn't exist just weeks ago. Rachel Monroe finds her at the coffee station, her silver hair catching the light as she approaches with the confident stride of someone bearing important news. "I heard about your email to Harper's," Rachel says, her voice warm with approval. "Taking control of your own narrative, that's the smartest thing you could have done. Too many people let others write their stories for them, then wonder why they don't recognize themselves in the telling." At her workstation, nestled between the usual collection of order slips and inventory sheets, Camila discovers a handwritten note from Renee Palmer. The chef's precise handwriting fills a small piece of cream-colored paper, and the words make Camila's chest tighten with recognition. Sometimes silence is a prison that disguises itself as peace. She folds the note carefully, tucking it into her apron pocket like a talisman. For the first time since her moment in the spotlight began, she believes that maybe her story is worth telling, and more importantly, that she's the right person to tell it. The afternoon brings an unexpected visitor. Graham Ellison appears in the restaurant's entryway, but not with the casual authority of someone claiming a reservation. Instead, he carries a simple paper bag and wears an expression that looks almost nervous, an emotion that seems foreign on his usually composed features. He approaches her workstation with the careful steps of someone walking on unfamiliar ground. From the bag, he produces a container of hibiscus tea, still warm, and a folder thick with printed documents. "I've been thinking about what you said," he begins, his voice carrying none of the commanding tone she's grown accustomed to. About actions meaning more than words, about proving change instead of just claiming it. The folder contains detailed plans for something called the Bennett Initiative, her name printed at the top in bold letters that make her breath catch. Page after page outlines a foundation designed to support the invisible workforce of the hospitality industry. Cooks who work double shifts and still struggle to pay rent. Housekeepers whose backs ache from years of bending over beds in luxury hotels. Dishwashers whose hands are permanently stained from cleaning up after other people's celebrations. Camila reads through the proposal in silence, her mind racing through implications and possibilities. When she finally looks up, her dark eyes meet his pale ones with the directness of someone who has learned not to accept anything at face value. "I'll only support this if I get to decide what it actually stands for," she says, her voice steady and clear. "Pretty words on expensive paper don't buy my endorsement. I need real control, real say in how this works." Graham's smile spreads slowly across his face, carrying genuine warmth instead of the practiced charm she's learned to distrust. "I was hoping you'd say that," he replies, reaching into his jacket pocket to produce a thick envelope. The foundation documents are already drawn up. You have full control. Board chair, final say on all decisions, complete autonomy over the mission and implementation. That evening, in the familiar sanctuary of her small apartment, Camila's phone buzzes with notifications she's learned to dread. 3 anonymous messages wait in her inbox, each one designed to cut deeper than the last. The cruelest one makes her hands shake as she reads it, "Fat nobody trying to be somebody. You'll fall back where you belong soon enough." When she calls Renee to share the messages, the chef's response is immediate and fierce. "Save them, block the senders, document everything. But don't you dare shrink back into silence because some coward with a keyboard can't stand seeing a woman rise. They don't deserve the gift of your retreat." Inspired by her friend's words, Camila opens her laptop and begins typing a response that feels like claiming territory. "My name is Camila Bennett," she writes, her fingers finding strength with each keystroke. "And I was never invisible. You just weren't looking hard enough to see me." 3 days later, Rachel extends an invitation that feels like stepping through a door she can never close again. A press conference in downtown Savannah where the Bennett Initiative will be officially announced. The location carries weight. This is a city built on tradition, where change moves at the pace of Spanish moss growing on ancient oaks. Renee finds her in the restaurant's break room, studying her reflection in the small mirror by the time clock. "Savannah will smile at you," the chef says, her voice carrying the wisdom of someone who has navigated Southern politics for decades. But remember, not every Southern smile comes wrapped in genuine kindness. Some of them hide teeth that bite. The press conference takes place in the elegant ballroom of a historic hotel overlooking the Savannah River. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over an audience of journalists, community leaders, and curious citizens. Camila stands at the podium wearing a navy blue dress that emphasizes her presence rather than hiding it, her shoulders squared with the confidence of someone who has found her voice and intends to use it. Her speech flows like water finding its natural course. She speaks about dignity, not as something granted by others, but as something inherent in every person who works with integrity. She talks about the exhaustion of being unseen, of cleaning up after celebrations you're not invited to join, of carrying the weight of other people's comfort while your own needs remain invisible. I think about my daughter Luna, she says, her voice carrying across the room with the power of absolute truth. About the example I want to set for her. I want her to know that being seen isn't a privilege you have to earn through silence or submission. It's a right you claim by existing fully in your own dignity. She speaks about the hands that serve food, that make beds, that scrub floors until they shine. About the people who arrive before dawn and leave after midnight, whose names are rarely known, but whose work makes everything else possible. The applause begins tentatively, scattered claps from an audience unsure how to respond to such raw honesty. But it grows person by person, until the entire room rises to its feet in recognition of something they may not have been prepared to hear, but cannot ignore. Backstage, surrounded by the controlled chaos of microphone stands and camera equipment, Camila is approached by a figure from her past. Mateo Cordero stands near the exit door, but this time, he doesn't have the desperate energy of someone making demands. Instead, he carries himself with the careful posture of someone who has learned something about humility. I didn't come to ask for anything, he says, his voice quiet but clear. I just wanted to give you this. He extends a sealed envelope, his hands steady despite the weight of the moment. I'm trying to become someone Luna could look at without shame. Someone who deserves to be part of something good instead of someone who just takes. Camila accepts the envelope but doesn't open it, holding it like something fragile that might contain either hope or heartbreak. This isn't forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever, but it's acknowledgement. And sometimes recognition comes before reconciliation. Gestures arrive ahead of words, and the possibility of healing begins with the simple act of showing up. Standing in that backstage space, holding a letter from a man who disappeared when she needed him most, Camila realizes that her story is no longer just about finding her voice. It's about what happens when that voice creates space for others to speak, when visibility becomes a gift you can give instead of something you have to fight for, when the woman the world tried to overlook becomes someone impossible to ignore. Morning sunlight streams through the simple cotton curtains of Camila's new home, casting gentle patterns across the hardwood floors that still smell faintly of lemon oil and fresh beginnings. The house itself is modest, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen barely large enough for 3 people to move around comfortably, but every corner holds something that matters. The braided rug in the living room was made by Maria, a fellow server who learned the craft from her grandmother in Guatemala. Luna's watercolor painting of a woman with strong hands hangs above the couch, the brushstrokes bold and unapologetic. The cast iron skillets came from the Ashford room, a goodbye gift from Renee when Camila finally turned in her apron for the last time. Here, surrounded by objects that carry stories instead of price tags, Camila has found something she didn't realize she was searching for, a silence that doesn't feel like hiding. In the kitchen, Luna and Graham are engaged in what has become their weekly culinary debate, this time over the proper lime-to-avocado ratio in guacamole. Graham squeezes half a lime into the bowl with the enthusiasm of someone who learned to cook from YouTube videos, while Luna watches with the patient amusement of a teenager who finds adult incompetence endearing. Too much acid, she declares, tasting the mixture with a tortilla chip. But then she grins and adds, but it's perfect because you made it. When Renee arrives, she brings a bottle of wine and the kind of laughter that fills up spaces, her voice carrying across the small rooms like music. She settles into the kitchen chair that's become hers over the past few months, regaling them with stories from the restaurant that feel like tales from another lifetime. Remember the first time I saw you face down Graham in that dining room, she says, gesturing with her wine glass. I knew right then that something was about to shift in the universe. You had this look, not angry, not scared, just absolutely present in your own power. The conversation is interrupted by the arrival of mail, including a thick envelope bearing the seal of the Georgia Department of Education. Inside, an invitation that makes Camila's hands tremble slightly as she reads. They want her as the keynote speaker at the state graduation ceremony for hospitality programs, hundreds of students who are starting their careers in the very industry where she spent 8 years learning to be invisible. Graham leans over her shoulder to read the invitation, his excitement immediate and infectious. "This is incredible, Camila. You'll be speaking to the next generation of service workers, telling them they don't have to choose between dignity and employment." His enthusiasm sparks an idea that's been percolating for weeks. He spreads new documents across the kitchen table, his movements animated with the energy of someone who's found a purpose beyond profit margins. "I want to expand the Bennett Initiative," he says, his pale eyes bright with possibility. Educational programs, leadership training, professional development specifically designed for hospitality workers. You would head up all the training and leadership components, design the curriculum, choose the instructors, set the standards. Camila studies the proposal with the careful attention of someone who has learned that good intentions and good outcomes aren't always the same thing. When she finally looks up, her expression carries the weight of lived experience. "I'll do it," she says, "but only if every single word of this program reflects what I believe: truth over politeness, respect over servility, visibility over silence, and the understanding that all honest work deserves dignity." Graham nods with the solemnity of someone making a sacred promise. "Your values, your vision, your voice. I'm just providing the resources." Later that afternoon, Camila's phone buzzes with a text from Mateo. The message is brief, respectful, sharing news rather than asking for anything. He's been accepted into an HVAC technical program, starts classes next month, is trying to build something stable for the first time in his adult life. Her response is equally brief but kind. "Congratulations. I hope this path brings you what you're looking for." It's not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever. But it's acknowledgement that people can change, that second chances are sometimes earned through consistent action rather than grand gestures. That evening, Luna spreads her homework across the kitchen table, working on an essay assignment that makes Camila's chest tighten with pride and recognition. The title, written in Luna's careful handwriting, reads, "My mother cleans up the world in her own way." As Camila reads her daughter's words, descriptions of strength that doesn't require loudness, of leadership that emerges from service, of dignity that can't be given or taken away because it comes from within, she realizes that she's not just running programs or giving speeches. She's planting seeds for a legacy that will outlive any single moment of recognition. Rachel Monroe calls just as the sun is setting, her voice warm with something that sounds like maternal pride. "I just heard your radio interview replay," she says. "Camila, you've become the reference point for authentic leadership in this industry. And somehow you've managed to do it while staying completely, recognizably yourself." The observation settles into Camila's heart like a blessing she didn't know she needed. In a world that constantly pressures people to choose between being likable and being real, she's managed to find a third option: being genuinely herself while creating space for others to do the same. On a golden afternoon in late spring, as they walk through Forsyth Park watching Luna chase pigeons with the unself-conscious joy of someone who's never doubted her right to take up space, Graham takes Camila's hand and speaks words that feel like a promise and a recognition wrapped together. "I didn't fall in love with a symbol or a story," he says, his voice carrying the quiet certainty of someone who's learned the difference between infatuation and genuine connection. "I fell in love with you, with your voice, your curves, your convictions, your refusal to be anything other than exactly who you are." Camila smiles, feeling the weight of her own power settle around her shoulders like a favorite sweater. "Then I hope you're ready for a woman who doesn't fit into molds or silence, who takes up space unapologetically and expects the same from everyone around her." 2 weeks later, she stands before 300 graduating students, looking out at faces that remind her of her younger self, hopeful, determined, and slightly uncertain about what comes next. Her speech flows like water finding its natural course, carrying messages about dignity, visibility, and the power of service that comes from choice rather than desperation. Graham sits in the front row, his presence supportive but not overshadowing, his applause enthusiastic but not proprietary. He's learned to be an ally rather than a savior, a partner rather than a patron. The first anniversary celebration of the Bennett Initiative fills the community center with voices that were once confined to back-of-house whispers. Maria, the former dishwasher, now leads workshops on workplace rights. James, who used to bus tables, teaches courses on hospitality management. Sarah, who cleaned hotel rooms for 15 years, has become an advocate for fair scheduling practices. As the evening winds down, Luna raises her glass of apple juice for the final toast, her 13-year-old voice carrying the wisdom of someone who's learned that strength and gentleness can coexist. Being kind doesn't mean being weak, she says, looking directly at her mother. My mom taught me that. Camila stands, her own glass raised, her voice filling the room with the authority of someone who has claimed her space and intends to keep it. To everyone who has ever been overlooked, who has ever been called invisible, who has ever been told their voice doesn't matter, never let anyone confuse your silence with absence. You have always mattered. You have always been here. And now, finally, the world is learning to see you. The applause that follows isn't polite or perfunctory. It's the sound of recognition, of dignity acknowledged, of a future being written by hands that were once hidden but are now impossible to ignore. Dear viewer, before we go on, can I ask you something? Where in the world are you watching from? Globe showing Europe, Africa? Drop your location in the comments. I'd love to know how far this story has reached. The Bennett Initiative has grown beyond anything Camila could have imagined when she first spoke those words in the Ashford Room's dining room. Major newspapers now carry headlines that make her pause over her morning coffee, phrases like leadership born in the kitchen, and the new voice of hospitality, printed in fonts that once seemed reserved for politicians and celebrities. But more than the recognition, it's the reach that amazes her, the way a single moment of refusing to be invisible has rippled outward like stones thrown into still water. She finds herself on panels now, sitting beside academics who study labor dynamics and corporate executives who speak in carefully measured phrases about workforce development. But instead of being intimidated by their credentials and PowerPoint presentations, Camila has learned to use her greatest strength, the ability to center real human experience in conversations that too often drift into abstract theory. When conference organizers expect her to bring fellow professionals, she arrives with people who still smell faintly of industrial soap and carry the quiet dignity of those who know what it means to work with their hands. Maria, who once hid her tears behind supply closet doors. James, whose English was dismissed as inadequate until someone finally listened to the wisdom he was offering in his accented words. Sarah, who cleaned hotel rooms for 15 years before discovering she had a gift for teaching others about dignity in service. These are the voices she amplifies, the stories she insists deserve center stage. Angie Delgado, who once cried silently in the linen closet at the Ashford Room, now stands before rooms full of housekeeping staff teaching workshops on self-worth and professional pride. Her transformation is perhaps the most visible proof of what happens when people are seen not as problems to be managed, but as human beings with untapped potential. At home, Luna has become Camila's unofficial creative consultant, approaching the initiative's work with the fresh perspective of someone who's never been told that certain ideas are impossible. One evening, while helping fold programs for an upcoming event, she looks up with the sudden brightness that signals an inspiration. What if we had a whole day just for complimenting the people who help? She suggests, her 13-year-old enthusiasm infectious. Like everyone who usually gets ignored gets to hear how amazing they are. The idea becomes the Foundation's Appreciation Day, an annual event that draws participants from across the Southeast. Graham has found his role in this growing movement, and it's not the one he might have expected. He works behind the scenes, handling legal paperwork, managing logistics, ensuring that the Foundation has the resources it needs to grow. But he never steps onto the stage, never claims credit, never positions himself as anything other than support staff for Camila's vision. During one particularly well-attended event in Atlanta, Camila notices a familiar figure standing at the back of the auditorium. Mateo has come without announcement, without fanfare, simply taking his place among the crowd like any other attendee. His presence doesn't demand acknowledgement, doesn't create drama. He's simply there listening. From the stage, Camila watches Luna notice her father. The girl doesn't flee or create a scene. Instead, she observes him with the calm curiosity of someone who's learned that people can change, that presence doesn't automatically equal disruption, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply show up. After a panel discussion about invisible labor and visible dignity, a journalist from The Atlantic approaches Camila with the kind of question that seems designed to create a soundbite rather than understanding. "Camila," the woman says, her recorder held between them like a barrier, "do you see yourself as a hero?" The question sits in the air for a moment while Camila considers how to respond to something that feels both flattering and fundamentally wrong. When she finally speaks, her voice carries the weight of honest exhaustion. "I see myself as someone who got tired of being silenced," she says simply. That's not heroism. That's just survival that decided to speak up. The Foundation's headquarters occupies a renovated Victorian house on the edge of Savannah's historic district, its high ceilings and tall windows creating spaces that feel both intimate and expansive. One wall of the main conference room is covered with Polaroid photographs, workers from across the region, their faces bright with the particular joy that comes from being truly seen. Dishwashers wearing their aprons like badges of honor. Housekeepers posing with cleaning supplies like artists with their tools. Busboys and food runners and prep cooks, all looking directly into the camera with the confidence of people who know their work matters. The morning mail brings an envelope bearing the official seal of the state of Georgia, and inside, an invitation that makes Camila's hands tremble slightly as she reads. The governor wants her as the keynote speaker for the state's technical school graduation ceremony. Thousands of students beginning careers in trades and service industries, many of them following paths similar to the one she's walked. Renee finds her staring at the invitation, her expression a mixture of honor and overwhelming responsibility. "You've always had this voice," Renee says, settling into the chair across from Camila's desk. The difference is that now the world has finally shut up long enough to listen. Late one evening, Graham discovers Camila sitting alone in the Foundation's main room, staring at a bronze plaque that lists the names of their first major supporters. Her posture carries the weight of someone wrestling with doubts that success can't entirely silence. "Sometimes I'm terrified of disappointing all these people who see me as some kind of symbol," she admits, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not strong all the time, Graham. I have days when I want to hide, when I doubt everything I'm doing, when I feel like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not." Graham sits beside her, taking her hand with the gentle certainty of someone who's learned that love means witnessing vulnerability without trying to fix it. "You don't have to be perfect," he says, his voice carrying the authority of lived experience. "You just have to keep showing up as yourself. That's what transforms people, not perfection, but presence. Not having all the answers, but being willing to keep asking the right questions." Inspired by Luna's suggestion, Camila installs an anonymous appreciation box in the Foundation's lobby, a simple wooden container where visitors can leave notes of gratitude or encouragement. The box fills quickly with handwritten messages that become daily reminders of impact she never expected to have. One note, written in shaky handwriting on a torn piece of notebook paper, makes her cry silently at her desk, "You made me want to live again." The message stays with her for days, a reminder that visibility is about more than professional recognition or social change. Sometimes it's about the fundamental human need to be acknowledged, to matter, to exist in ways that register with other people. When Mateo's next message arrives, it's not a text but a short video sent without commentary. The footage shows his graduation ceremony from the HVAC technical program, dozens of students in caps and gowns receiving certificates that represent new beginnings and second chances. Mateo appears briefly in the background, standing with other family members, his face carrying a quiet pride that speaks of work done and promises kept. Camila watches the video twice, taking in the details of his transformation. The clean clothes, the steady posture, the way he stands among the other attendees like someone who belongs rather than someone who's hiding. When she responds, her message is simple but genuine. Congratulations. It's not forgiveness, not yet, but it's recognition that change is possible, that people can grow beyond their worst choices, that sometimes the most generous thing you can offer is the space to become better. And in the growing echo of her own name, in the expanding reach of her influence, Camila is learning that true power isn't about being heard. It's about creating space for others to find their voices too. The morning arrives crisp and clear, with the kind of Georgia autumn light that makes everything look like it's been painted in watercolors. Today is the day Camila Bennett will address 3,000 graduating students from technical schools and hospitality programs across the state, and the weight of that responsibility sits in her chest like something precious and fragile. She stands before her bedroom mirror, adjusting the navy blue dress she chose for its simple elegance, a garment that speaks rather than shouts, that commands attention through quiet confidence rather than flash. Her hair is pulled back in a style that frames her face without hiding it, and at her ears rest the pearl earrings that belonged to her mother, small tokens of strength passed down through generations of women who learned to speak when speaking mattered most. The drive to Atlanta passes in comfortable silence, Graham's hands steady on the steering wheel, while Luna sits in the back seat with a hand-drawn poster that reads "Go Mom" in bright purple letters decorated with hearts and exclamation points. The girl's excitement is infectious, her pride radiating through the car like warmth from a fireplace. At the Georgia State University Auditorium, the parking lot buzzes with the energy of families gathering to celebrate achievements that represent more than just certificates. They represent hopes realized, second chances seized, and futures built on the foundation of honest work. Renee Palmer waves from near the entrance, her eyes already bright with unshed tears of pride for her former colleague who refused to stay hidden. Backstage, surrounded by the controlled chaos of event coordinators and sound technicians, Camila feels the familiar flutter of nerves that comes before any performance. But this isn't performance. This is testimony, the sharing of truth that might help someone else find their own voice. She thinks about all the mornings she woke up dreading another day of being invisible, all the evenings she came home exhausted not just from physical work, but from the emotional labor of pretending she didn't matter. When her name is announced, she walks onto the stage with measured steps, her posture straight but not rigid, her presence filling the vast space in a way that has nothing to do with volume and everything to do with authenticity. The applause that greets her is respectful but tentative, the sound of an audience that isn't quite sure what to expect from this woman, whose story they've heard in fragments, but never in her own words. She approaches the microphone and waits for the applause to fade, using the silence to make eye contact with faces scattered throughout the auditorium. When she finally speaks, her voice carries clearly through the sound system, each word chosen with the precision of someone who has learned that every syllable matters. "I spent most of my adult life trying not to be noticed," she begins, the simple honesty of the statement settling over the audience like a blanket. "Even though my body already drew attention in a world that prefers women who take up less space. I thought invisibility was safety, that silence was survival." She tells them about that night at the Ashford Room, about Graham's question that cut through her careful composure like a blade. "Is this what you always wanted to do with your life?" She describes how that moment of humiliation became the seed of something she didn't even recognize as courage at the time. "He meant it as dismissal," she continues, her voice growing stronger with each sentence. "But sometimes the worst thing someone can say to you becomes the best thing that ever happened to you, because it forces you to ask yourself, what do I actually want? What am I worth? What voice am I keeping locked inside because I'm afraid of what happens when I use it?" The audience leans forward, drawn in by the raw honesty of her narrative. There are no PowerPoint slides, no carefully crafted metaphors, just one woman sharing the truth of her experience with 3,000 people who recognize themselves in her story. She talks about Luna, about the weight of single motherhood, about working double shifts and coming home too tired to dream, but never too tired to love. About the silence that wasn't shyness, but strategy, the invisibility that wasn't weakness, but a way of surviving in systems that weren't designed to see people like her as whole human beings. Every no I heard became fuel for my eventual yes, she says, her eyes scanning the graduates in their caps and gowns. Every time someone overlooked me, dismissed me, treated me like I was less than human, it added to the strength I didn't know I was building. And when I finally spoke up, it wasn't with anger or bitterness. It was with the quiet power of someone who knows exactly who she is. The auditorium is completely silent now, 3,000 people hanging on every word as Camila reaches the heart of her message. Today, we're not just celebrating your technical skills or your academic achievements, she says, her voice carrying across the vast space with the authority of lived truth. We're celebrating your value as human beings. Because every person who works with integrity, who serves others with dignity, who shows up day after day to do the essential work that keeps our world running, every one of you deserves to be seen, to be respected, to be treated as the vital part of our community that you are. The silence that follows her last word lasts for perhaps 3 seconds. Then the auditorium explodes. The applause starts as a roar and builds from there, becoming something bigger than sound, a physical force that seems to lift the roof. Students leap to their feet, some crying, others shouting, all of them understanding that they've just heard something that will change how they see themselves and their work. Parents in the balcony stand and cheer, recognizing in Camila's words of validation they've been waiting their whole lives to hear. Through the thunderous applause, Luna appears at the edge of the stage, her curls bouncing as she runs toward her mother with the unbridled joy of someone who has just watched their hero become everyone else's hero too. "You killed it, Mom," she shouts, her voice barely audible over the continuing ovation. Camila lifts her daughter into her arms, feeling the vibration of 3,000 people applauding against her chest like a heartbeat amplified. Graham appears beside them, his own eyes wet with tears as he pulls both of them into an embrace that feels like coming home. "You told the truth," he says, his voice rough with emotion. And it echoed in every heart in this room. From the side of the stage, a figure approaches with careful steps. Mateo stands there in a modest suit, his hair neatly trimmed, his posture carrying the quiet dignity of someone who has learned something about humility. He doesn't make speeches or grand gestures. Instead, he simply walks up to Camila and speaks words that feel like they've been waiting years to be said. "I'm proud of you," he says, his voice steady and sincere. "Really proud. Not just of this moment, but of who you've become, what you've built, how you've raised our daughter." Camila takes a deep breath, feeling the weight of years of anger and disappointment shift into something that might, someday, become forgiveness. "You're trying," she says simply. "That's more than I thought I'd ever see. That's enough for today." Standing on that stage, surrounded by applause that shows no sign of fading, holding her daughter while the man she once loved tries to become the father he should have been all along, Camila realizes that this moment isn't an ending or even a beginning. It's a recognition, of voice found, of dignity claimed, of the truth that some silences are meant to be broken, and some women are meant to be impossible to ignore. Life has begun to find its own gentle rhythm, like water settling into a new course after years of fighting against rocky barriers. Camila's new routine isn't marked by the frantic rushing between shifts and responsibilities that once defined her days. Instead, there are spaces now, breathing room between commitments, silences that feel like rest rather than emptiness, moments when she can sit with her coffee and watch morning sunlight move across her kitchen table without calculating how many minutes she has before the next obligation. Her house sits on a tree-lined street in a neighborhood where children still play hopscotch on sidewalks and neighbors know each other's names. It's modest, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a living room that doubles as an office, but every piece of furniture has been chosen with intention rather than necessity. The pale yellow curtains let in maximum light, The second-hand sofa is soft enough for afternoon naps, and the kitchen table is big enough for homework, laptop work, and the occasional dinner party. In the backyard, Luna has claimed a corner for her garden experiment. Tomato plants climb wooden stakes with the determined optimism of youth. Basil spreads in fragrant green patches, and a stubborn lemon tree stands in defiant resistance to producing fruit. Graham has become the unofficial irrigation engineer, installing a drip system that ensures everything gets watered even when Luna's attention drifts to other 13-year-old priorities. On a Thursday afternoon that feels like grace made visible, Renee Palmer appears at the back door with a bottle of wine and the kind of mischievous expression that promises good-natured trouble. "So now you have a fan club," she announces, settling into one of the patio chairs with theatrical indignation. "And I have to make appointments to see my old friend? What's next, security guards?" Graham looks up from washing vegetables at the kitchen sink, his sleeves rolled up and water droplets catching the light on his forearms. "Last week, an investor mistook me for the caterer at a fundraising dinner," he adds with a grin. "Got a $20 tip and everything. I didn't have the heart to correct him." Camila's laughter bubbles up from someplace deep and unguarded, the sound carrying none of the careful modulation she once used to avoid drawing unwanted attention. It's the first time in years she's laughed without that underlying current of guilt for daring to be happy, for taking up space with joy instead of just enduring whatever space was grudgingly allocated to her. The phone rings, interrupting their easy banter. Rachel Monroe's voice carries the excitement of someone bearing news that might change everything again. The PBS documentary producer called, Rachel says without preamble. They want to do a feature-length film about the Bennett initiative. Full access, major distribution, the works. Camila feels the familiar tightening in her chest that comes with opportunities that feel too big, too exposing. "Only if it shows the collective," she says finally. "I'm not the story here, we are. I'm just one thread in something much larger." Rachel's smile is audible through the phone. "Then I think we already have our title, Threads of Change." That evening, Luna appears in the kitchen with dirt under her fingernails and the particular glow that comes from physical work done in fresh air. Graham has surprised her with a restored red bicycle he found at an estate sale, spending weeks sanding rust and replacing chains until it gleamed like new. She's been riding circles around the block, her voice carrying on the evening air as she shouts "thank you" to anyone within hearing distance. While organizing the attic, Graham discovers a yellowed envelope tucked between old photo albums, Camila's name written across the front in her own younger handwriting. Inside, a letter she wrote to herself during one of the darkest periods at the Ashford Room, when silence felt like the only safe choice and invisibility seemed like permanent fate. She reads it now in the fading light of their bedroom, her lips moving silently over words written by a woman who felt so small, so forgettable, so convinced that her voice would never matter to anyone. The letter ends with a sentence that makes her heart clench. "You're worth something, even if nobody sees it yet." The tears come without warning, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming tenderness of speaking across time to a version of herself who couldn't have imagined this moment, this house, this love, this platform, this life where her voice doesn't just matter, but creates space for others to speak. That night, her phone buzzes with a video message from Mateo. No words, just footage of Luna riding her new bicycle, filmed from the sidewalk at respectful distance. He doesn't intrude, doesn't call attention to his presence, just documents a moment of his daughter's joy and shares it like a gift offered without expectation. Camila doesn't respond immediately, but she saves the video, recognizing something in the gesture that feels like healing. Not the dramatic reconciliation of movies, but the quiet acknowledgement that some relationships can exist in new forms, that forgiveness doesn't always require forgetting, and that love can be expressed through respectful distance as much as through presence. The Bennett Initiative continues expanding, launching a program specifically designed for teenagers whose parents work in hospitality, kids who understand what it means to have a parent who comes home exhausted from serving others, who've learned to be proud of work that society often treats as invisible. Luna becomes an unofficial consultant for the program, contributing ideas with the unfiltered creativity of someone who hasn't yet learned that certain things are impossible. What about calling the workshops hidden talents or gifts nobody noticed yet? She suggests, sprawled across the living room floor with colored pencils and poster board. The Foundation's headquarters now features a mural painted by local artists, deep blue brushstrokes forming words that have become their unofficial motto. The invisible also carries light. On a warm evening, as they sit on the front porch watching fireflies dance above Luna's garden, Graham asks the kind of question that creates openings for deeper truth. "If you could say something to the Camila from 10 years ago," he begins, his voice carrying the gentleness of someone who understands that some answers can't be rushed, "what would it be?" Camila looks up at the stars scattered across the Savannah sky, thinking about all those nights when she walked home from double shifts, so tired she could barely put one foot in front of the other, convinced that her life would always be defined by other people's comfort, other people's needs, other people's recognition. "I would tell her to hold on just a little longer," she says finally. That the silence isn't permanent. That her voice is already there, already strong, already worthy of being heard. She just needs to wait for the right moment to use it. The next morning, walking Luna to school through streets that have become as familiar as family, Camila notices something new painted on a brick wall near the corner market. It's her face, rendered in bold strokes of black and white, with 2 words written underneath in flowing script, "Clear Voice." She stops walking, staring at this unexpected art that transforms an ordinary Tuesday morning into something that feels like recognition from the universe itself. Luna follows her gaze and grins with the particular delight teenagers take in seeing their parents surprised by the world. "Mom, you're literally on a wall," she says, as if this is the most natural thing in the world. Camila laughs, shaking her head in wonder. "All I ever wanted was to plant a lemon tree that would actually grow lemons," she says. How did it turn into this? But even as she asks the question, she knows the answer. It turned into this because sometimes the smallest acts of courage create the biggest changes. Because one moment of refusing to be invisible can inspire others to step into their own light. Because voices once found have a way of calling to other voices across the darkness, creating choruses where there used to be silence. Standing on that sidewalk, looking at her face painted on a wall in a city that has become home, Camila Bennett understands that she's no longer the woman who once served coffee and invisibility in equal measure. She's become something she never planned to be, not a hero or a symbol, but simply herself, fully present and impossible to ignore. Success, Camila is learning, comes with its own particular gravity. The Bennett Initiative has grown beyond anything she imagined that night when she first spoke up in the Ashford Rooms dining room, expanding into multiple locations across 3 states, partnering with labor organizations and culinary schools, creating ripples that reach places she's never been and people she's never met. With growth comes visibility, and with visibility comes scrutiny that cuts in directions she wasn't prepared for. Rachel Monroe finds her in the Foundation's conference room on a Tuesday morning, surrounded by program reports and funding proposals, her silver hair catching the light as she delivers news with characteristic directness. "The bigger the platform, the brighter the spotlight," Rachel says, settling into the chair across from Camila's desk. And unfortunately, the brighter the spotlight, the deeper the shadows it casts. People are starting to take shots at you online. The criticism comes in waves, washing across social media platforms with the particular cruelty that anonymity enables. Comments about her body, her background, her qualifications, her right to speak for anyone about anything. Words designed to cut, to diminish, to remind her that some people believe visibility should come with a price tag of humiliation. When Graham suggests hiring a public relations firm to manage the narrative, to craft responses that deflect rather than engage, Camila's answer comes swift and certain. "Don't protect me from the truth," she says, her voice carrying the authority of someone who has learned that facing difficult things head-on is often the only way through them. "Give me tools to handle it, but don't shelter me from what people are actually saying." At home, In the sanctuary of their small kitchen, where evening light filters through yellow curtains, Luna approaches with the careful steps of someone carrying a question too heavy for 13-year-old shoulders. "Mom," she says, her voice barely above a whisper, "why do some people hate you without even knowing you?" Camila pulls her daughter into her lap, feeling the familiar weight of wanting to protect while also preparing, of shielding while also strengthening. "Sometimes," she says, stroking Luna's curls, "when someone starts shining, it makes people uncomfortable if they haven't learned how to step out of their own shadows yet. It's not really about me, baby. It's about what seeing me succeed makes them think about their own lives." During one of their regular coffee meetings, Renee shares a memory that illustrates the long history of invisibility they're both fighting against. She describes a dinner service where a maitre d' repeatedly ignored her presence, making eye contact with every white chef in the kitchen while treating her, a black woman in chef's whites, as if she were part of the equipment rather than a person deserving of professional courtesy. The story sparks an idea that feels both audacious and necessary. Camila begins planning what she calls equity dinners, events where the traditional power dynamics of service are intentionally reversed. Members of Savannah's social elite are invited to serve meals to housekeepers, dishwashers, maintenance workers, and cleaning staff, creating opportunities for conversations that normally never happen across class and race lines. The first dinner unfolds like a quiet revolution. A prominent real estate developer finds himself serving soup to a stock clerk who works 14-hour shifts to support 3 children and aging parents. As the immigrant worker shares his story, the dreams that brought him here, the education he's pursuing at night, the dignity he maintains despite work that others view as menial, tears stream down the developer's face in recognition of humanity he'd never been asked to see. That evening, Graham captures something precious on his phone. Luna reading aloud from the transcript of her mother's first public speech, her young voice carrying the cadence and conviction of someone who has learned that words of power, that truth spoken clearly can change hearts and minds. When he shows Camila the video later, his voice carries wonder and pride in equal measure. "She's learning to say what she feels," he observes. "She's learning it from watching you." A text message from Mateo arrives without fanfare, sharing news the way people share weather reports, factual, brief, without expectation of elaborate response. He's been hired for a full-time position, starts next month, is building something stable for the first time in Luna's lifetime. Camila's response matches his tone. "Good luck." Not warm, not cold, just acknowledgement that people can change directions, that second chances sometimes work, that life continues moving forward even when the past hasn't been fully resolved. Luna's curiosity about her parents' history emerges during dish duty, her hands soapy, and her question direct with the fearlessness of someone who has learned that difficult truths are survivable. "Were you and my dad ever happy together?" she asks, not looking up from a plate she's scrubbing. Camila considers the question while drying a glass, thinking about young love and impossible dreams, and the way people can care deeply for each other while still being wrong for each other. "Yes," she says finally. "For a while, we were very happy. And that time has value too, even though it didn't last." The small lemon tree in their backyard has finally decided to trust the process. After months of stubborn green growth and Luna's patient watering, it produces its first fruit, 3 perfect lemons hanging like golden promises among the dark green leaves. Camila harvests one with ceremony, wiping it clean with her apron before presenting it to Luna with the solemnity of someone offering treasure. "You believed it would work," she says, watching her daughter's face light up with the particular joy that comes from seeing faith rewarded. Luna turns the lemon over in her hands, examining it from every angle before looking up at her mother with wisdom that seems borrowed from someone much older. "He just needed patience," she says simply, as if explaining the most obvious truth in the world. Standing in their small backyard, holding the first fruit of their stubborn little tree, Camila understands that growth, whether in plants or people or movements, happens on its own timeline. You can provide the right conditions, offer consistent care, protect against obvious threats. But ultimately, Blooming happens when it happens, in its own season, according to laws deeper than desire or schedule. The Bennett Initiative will continue growing, facing criticism and celebration in equal measure. Luna will continue becoming herself, finding her own voice while building on the foundation her mother has provided. And Camila will continue learning to carry both the weight and the lightness that come with visibility, the responsibility of representing something larger than herself, balanced by the simple joy of being exactly who she is. Some stories end with dramatic resolutions. Others end with the quiet recognition that life continues, that change is a process rather than an event, and that the most important victories are often the ones that happen in small moments between ordinary people who choose to see each other clearly. The year ends with a celebration that feels like watching seeds planted in darkness finally break through soil into sunlight. The Bennett Foundation's annual gathering fills the restored ballroom of the old Cypress Bay restaurant, now renamed Casa Aurora, a fitting name for a place where new days begin and forgotten voices find their strength. The venue carries its own symbolism, transformed from a place where hierarchy was rigid and invisible people stayed hidden into a space where dignity is the only currency that matters. Every table holds small treasures that tell larger stories. Photo frames display candid moments from behind the scenes, dishwashers laughing over shared meals, housekeepers taking pride in perfectly made beds, prep cooks concentrated over cutting boards, all accompanied by handwritten cards sharing brief glimpses into lives that usually remain unseen. These aren't posed portraits of success stories, but authentic snapshots of people being fully human in their work environments. When Camila takes the microphone, the room falls into the kind of respectful silence that comes not from obligation, but from genuine desire to listen. She's learned to use her voice like an instrument, modulating tone and pace to carry meaning beyond words, to reach hearts as well as minds. Tonight we celebrate the invisible made visible, she begins, her words carrying across the room with the authority of someone who has earned every syllable. But more than that, we celebrate the truth that you were never actually invisible. You were always here, always valuable, always deserving of recognition. We just created a world that finally learned how to see you. She calls Angie Morales to the stage, the same woman who once hid her tears behind supply closet doors at the Ashford Room. Now Angie coordinates support teams across 3 locations, her transformation visible not just in her confident posture, but in the way she speaks about her work with pride instead of apology. When she accepts her recognition, tears stream down her face not from shame, but from the overwhelming joy of being acknowledged for who she truly is. Among the guests, moving with the careful respect of someone who understands his place in this room, Mateo appears in the uniform of his new company. He's lost weight, carries himself differently, and when he approaches Camila with an envelope, his hands are steady with the confidence of someone who has finally learned to keep promises. Inside the envelope, a bank deposit slip showing the first payment into a college fund he's established for Luna. It's not large. The amount reflects a working man's salary rather than windfall wealth, but it represents something more valuable than money. It represents consistency, commitment, the quiet dignity of showing up with actions instead of excuses. Camila accepts the gesture with a gracious nod, recognizing the effort without reopening wounds that have finally begun to heal. This is forgiveness in its most practical form. Not the dramatic reconciliation of movies, but the simple acknowledgement that people can change, that second chances sometimes work, and that healing often happens through small, consistent gestures rather than grand declarations. As the evening moves through its rhythm of speeches and embraces, Graham appears beside her with the quiet presence that has become his signature. He doesn't claim space or demand attention, just offers his support through simple proximity. When he kisses the back of her neck, it's with the intimate familiarity of someone who has learned to love without possessing, to support without overshadowing. Luna rises from her table with the natural confidence of someone who has watched her mother claim space and learned that visibility is a birthright rather than a privilege to be earned. She lifts her glass of sparkling cider with theatrical flair, her 13-year-old voice carrying clearly across the room. To my mother, she declares, her face bright with pride and mischief, who became a lighthouse when I didn't even know we were lost in the dark. Renee Palmer, never one to be outdone in eloquence, stands with her wine glass raised and her voice carrying the warm authority of someone who has watched transformation happen one day at a time. To the woman who became a verb, she announces, her words carrying across the celebrating crowd. Who turned surviving into thriving, who made invisible into impossible to ignore, who transformed once upon a time into here and now and tomorrow. The applause that follows isn't polite or perfunctory. It's the sound of recognition, of gratitude, of people understanding that they're witnessing something rare, a moment when individual courage has rippled outward to create collective change. Hours later, back in the quiet sanctuary of her small house, Camila finds Luna asleep in her bed with a book open across her chest, a biography of Rosa Parks that she's reading for a school project. The sight of her daughter learning about other women who refuse to accept invisibility makes Camila's heart swell with pride and hope for the future. Graham waits on the front porch with 2 steaming mugs of chamomile tea and a soft blanket draped across his shoulders. The night air carries the scent of jasmine and the distant sound of ships moving along the Savannah River, creating a peaceful soundtrack for reflection. As Camila settles beside him, she allows herself a moment to remember the woman she used to be, the one who kept her head down and her voice quiet, who believed that taking up less space was the same as staying safe, who whispered to herself, just keep your head down and keep going, like a mantra against despair. Now, she lifts her face to the cool night air and breathes deeply, feeling peace settle in her chest like something she's finally allowed herself to keep. Graham studies her profile in the soft light from the street lamp, his expression carrying wonder at the privilege of witnessing someone come fully into their own power. You changed my life without even trying, he says quietly, his voice carrying the sincerity of someone who has learned the difference between fascination and genuine love. Camila turns to meet his eyes, her own voice steady with the confidence of someone who knows exactly who she is and what she's worth. I just refuse to be erased, she says simply. From inside the house comes a sleepy voice, small and trusting in the darkness. Luna appears in the doorway wearing pajamas and carrying the drowsy sweetness of someone pulled from dreams. Mom, she says, moving toward them with the automatic navigation of childhood. Will you say that thing again? The thing you said at the end? Camila opens her arms and Luna settles into the warm space between her parents, creating a tableau of contentment that would have seemed impossible just 2 years ago. Looking down at her daughter's expectant face, Camila speaks the words that have become both blessing and challenge, inheritance and inspiration. Your job isn't to be invisible, baby, she whispers, her voice carrying all the love and strength she has to offer. And neither is mine. Under the vast Georgia sky, surrounded by the scent of blooming jasmine and the quiet sounds of a city settling into sleep, 3 people sit together in the knowledge that some silences are meant to be broken, some voices are meant to be heard, and some women are meant to be impossible to ignore. The story continues, written now not in moments of crisis, but in the steady rhythm of lives lived with intention, dignity, and the understanding that visibility, real visibility, isn't something you achieve once and keep forever. It's something you choose again and again, every time you speak your truth instead of swallowing it, every time you take up space instead of shrinking, every time you remember that your voice matters simply because it's yours. Camila Bennett's story isn't just about one woman finding her voice in a moment of humiliation. It's about the profound truth that lives within each of us, that dignity isn't something we earn through perfection or lose through struggle, but something we carry simply by being human. When she stood in that dining room and spoke her truth to a powerful man who saw her as invisible, she didn't just change her own life. She lit a beacon for every person who has ever felt overlooked, undervalued, or forgotten by a world that measures worth in all the wrong ways. Her journey from the shadows of service to the spotlight of leadership reminds us that the most revolutionary act isn't always rebellion. Sometimes it's simply refusing to disappear. But here's the question that should haunt us all. How many times have we chosen silence when our voice was needed? How many moments have we let pass, believing that speaking up would cost us more than staying quiet? Camila's transformation challenges us to examine our own complicity in systems that render certain people invisible. Would you have had the courage to speak truth to power in that restaurant? Would you have risked everything for the chance to be seen as fully human? And perhaps most importantly, what dreams are you keeping locked away because you've convinced yourself that your voice doesn't matter, that your story isn't worth telling? The beauty of Camila's legacy isn't just in what she accomplished, but in what she made possible for others. Every person who found their voice through the Bennett Initiative, every worker who stood a little taller because someone finally saw their dignity, every child like Luna who grew up believing that visibility is a birthright rather than a privilege, they are all echoes of that single moment when one woman decided she was done being invisible. Your voice matters too. Your story has the power to change someone's life, maybe even your own. If this journey moved you, if Camila's courage sparked something within you, then share this story. Follow us for more tales of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Like this video if it reminded you that you're worthy of being seen. Because in a world that profits from our silence, the most defiant thing we can do is speak up, show up, and refuse to be forgotten.